Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with our host, Ned Denison.
Hello, everyone. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, we've had help from this lady in Canada. So we thought we would get her on the Zoom call for people to understand who she is. Lee Shimano, please say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
And as an introduction, she has been a supporter of Toronto and perhaps broader base than that, marathon swimming over the past decades. She has a unique collection of memorabilia, of which she started to share only a small sample with us, which we put on our Facebook page. Even with that small sample, it's helped us to clarify some old swim records, especially the Canadian National Exhibition, which for those of you who are familiar was certainly one of the top swims of its era. That helped us define what we call majors. Think about major competitions in golf and tennis. It allowed us to know who the winners were year by year. We then updated biographies on the website. The long swim database then included those results in their records. And Steve at WOWSA was able to update Open Waterpedia, and we published a number of articles. So again, Lee, if I haven't said it enough times, many, many thanks.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Tell us about your own personal swimming history.
Well, I should have made a great story to tell you, but basically I just started off as a recreational swimmer. It was a family thing. My mother was a great swimmer. As far as anything formal, eventually I did a little bit of synchro, which I enjoyed but didn't love. I have a bit of a competitive edge, or I did. So I eventually got involved, I guess, at high school level. And fortunately, I was asked onto the EYC, which is a suburb of Toronto. Coincidentally, they have produced Olympic swimmers, not myself. Penny Oleksiak swam at the same high school and EYAC. It's an established swim club. From there, I guess I didn't do a whole lot other than recreational stuff for maybe 10 or so years. And I joined the Masters in Etobicoke. You know, middle of the road kind of swimmer. Kept it up mostly for fitness, but became very involved, I guess, socially. And it's probably where the beginning of my history leaning with swimming started. Our coach, Ted Roach, was an accomplished swimmer. His family were all swimmers. His daughter swam Lake Ontario. So it was probably the beginning of my big interest in swimming.
And how did you catch the marathon bug, so to speak?
Oh, I don't know if I've actually caught it, but it sort of, you know, sits in the periphery through Kim. Kim moved into our community. Her family was originally, the Lumsden family was from the community that I currently live in. And through Kim, our children were roughly the same ages, and she swam beside me in Masters. And, you know, one thing led to the next. She's a very resourceful girl, and she kind of, you know, reeled me in bit by bit. And that's basically how it started.
Note to all aspiring marathon swimmers, one of the core skills you want to have is convincing people they actually want to throw up on escort boats in the middle of the night, and they actually want to go to places that aren't noted vacation resorts like Dover and spend a week. So that resourcefulness comes in handy. You did some planning and some crewing, some observing and handling, as we say, on a few marathon swims. Tell us about the kind of the first one and surprises you might have had along the way and why you went again.
I haven't been able to answer that. The first one was very memorable. It was actually horrific. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was Kim's first attempt in many, many years. She successfully swam in '76. So this was many years thereafter. She was in okay shape, but she wasn't in great shape. I think it was shortly after she had lost her father, Cliff, and she decided that she would, you know, commemorate his memory. She wanted to do a double crossing of Lake Ontario. So we literally walked down the street that we both lived on in Toronto, walked down to the beginning of the swim. And of course, we hit a storm because that's Kim's specialty, and it was not a good it was not a good swim at all.
How long were you on the boat?
Oh, too long, probably. I'm guessing 8 to 10 hours. Probably half of that was trying to get back into Toronto. It was quite wicked. We had lost, almost lost a lifeguard. You know, everything that could go wrong went wrong on that. So that was my initial experience, and I said, "Oh my God, I'll never ever do that again," which wasn't true.
And then she bought you coffee one day and told you how wonderful you were, and
Oh
then
my goodness.
reeled you in for another one.
She's a butter-upper, that girl. You know, it was a horrible experience, but it was also very fascinating. The adventure was, you know, something obviously I did again and again and again.
And how many more of these have you done? And tell us about the best of them. And was there any that was worse than the first one?
There was actually yes, a very critical swim that was worse than the first. Or maybe it was up there, but the consequences could have been much more significant. The best is probably the one that I should talk about, very memorable, 2004, which was the 50th anniversary of Marilyn Bell's swim, who I mentioned, who is my absolute hero. Got me through the angst of my teen years, that kind of thing. 2004, the CNE decided to commemorate Marilyn Bell's epic swim, and Kim also coincidentally decided to do a solo swim, and she had pre-booked this quite a while in advance. She's always an early bird. So we set out to do a solo swim, but at the same time, there was a relay that was coming across Lake Ontario, accomplished, successful lake swimmers, and our swim timing was way off. It was not successful that year, but it ended with a wonderful ceremony at the CNE with Marilyn Bell in attendance. It was a very, very nice day. So from a bad swim to a very nice commemoration, it was quite memorable. 2006, Kim finally got her second swim under her belt. And she, at that time, for a very short period of time, until Colleen Shields took the record about 2 weeks away, Kim would have been the oldest woman to swim Lake Ontario, which was one of her personal goals. So that was, it was actually a lot of fun. We came into Toronto. Caravana was on at the same time, which is a gigantic Caribbean festival. So it was very festive and nice to finally, you know, have her success. So.
And when you look at those all those various crewing you did, tell us about the best practices you observed, and you can give names. And tell us of the practices that weren't so great, but don't give us the names on those.
I don't have to give you names. It's well known. Best practices really is, you know, as tight as you can make the crew. That is, to me, including the land crew. We had one year, the last swim, which was also not successful, an amazing land crew. The only thing they missed was the eating bit, because most of them had not been on an actual swim. So they showered us with big, beautiful lunches, which proved to be not so great in the middle of the swim. But I think best practices is the safety factor, everybody being on the same page, having one person, not necessarily the swim master because they appear on that day, but one person who knows everybody and everything everyone is doing. And I find that occasionally people do not defer to that one person, and it can cause issues, as you probably know. But just keeping it as tight as possible, to me, is the best practice. Probably the most difficult experience that I have been through was the last attempt that Kim made. And what I learned from that, and would never ever do again, is although we had a great land crew, we had a practice run, everybody knew what they were doing. We had a great evacuation plan, very detailed, and we actually didn't practice that. we did a sort of cursory attempt. We did the 10 mile out on Lake Ontario, beautiful sunny day. Everybody's taking photographs. We went through the motions of this is what we will do should we run into trouble. And when push came to shove, we could not do any of the evacuation plan. It was quite disastrous. It was a Mayday call. We involved, I think, 5 different rescue operations to try and get us out of the water. It was very, very close. It was frightening. So myself, I would never go on to swim again without actually practicing a rescue. And it would have to be, in circumstances that are not ideal. People wouldn't have their cameras out taking beautiful pictures of the geese and that kind of thing.
Just on that, just a couple of observations from my world. Obviously, Lake Ontario, when you're in the middle, you're in the middle.
Yes.
But for people doing a river swim or a swim along a coastline, it actually doesn't take a lot of time to drop a couple of cars along the way. To drop a car halfway, drop a car at the end of the beginning, whatever it is, so that as part of that rescue plan, if you decide to abort the swim halfway, you can actually tuck into the small harbor along the way, and you've got a car there. And that gives you a flexibility that you don't normally have. When you talk about the crew and preparation, I took a young swimmer to the channel a few years ago. And before he went, we put the crew in a boat, and we took the swimmer who was quite young, and we threw him in the water. And we said, don't get lost, just amuse yourself. Because the next 2 or 3 hours are literally about the crew. So it's nothing to do with you, the swimmer. You just happen to be in the water. And there was something wrong in the crew. There was somebody who was a little bit not comfortable, and it was the family parental representative.
Yes.
And we finally kind of had to get him in a headlock and go, what is it that's bothering you? And he said, I'm terrified. I'm terrified that I'm going to pull him out of the water because I'm scared to death. And everyone else is going to say he could have made it.
Yeah.
So we agreed at that point that if he pulled him out for any reason, all of us were going to say, yep, he had no chance. He had to be pulled. It was the best move. And after that, everything got relaxed and he was okay. You come from a part of the world, Toronto, that's seen some incredible swimmers. And there's just 3 names I want to throw out there who are all dual honorees of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame and the International Swimming Hall of Fame. And that is Cliff Lumsden, who's Kim's father, yes. Marilyn Bell, who you just declared as one of your heroes, and Cindy Nicholas, who unfortunately passed away a little less than 5 years ago. Tell us about, what you know about them, your involvement, what they mean to that community.
Cindy Nicholas, I did not know that well. Certainly our paths crossed several times. She and I spent quite a bit of time together in the 2004 swim because we were both landlocked. I had been on the lake the previous day with Kim in the unsuccessful swim. So we were there when Marilyn Bell and her team, her relay was coming in, which was very exciting. Cindy, sadly at the time, had, I guess, her swimmer shoulder that she had nursed for a long time. So she was quite uncomfortable, but we had some nice conversation. She decided to crew with us in our last swim. And unfortunately, so there were times when we did connect, but her mother was not well at the time. And little did I know is that Cindy was actually ill as well, and she hadn't disclosed that. So I didn't know her that well. Cliff, I knew fairly well, I guess. He, coincidentally, he lived right across the road from where I'm living now. The Lumsden family home is just across the road. So through Kim, I knew Cliff. He worked at the Gus Ryder pool in our area, and I swam there. So I had that connection with Cliff. Marilyn. I met Marilyn through Kim. I think I'm going to say sometime in the 80s. She happened to be at the Ontario Championships when I won my first Ontario Championship medal as an adult. So I have a whole series of photos because at the time I was still really gaga about Marilyn Bell, having, the history of her being my hero when I was 15. She's absolutely a wonderful woman. She is so soft spoken, but powerful at the same time, very inspirational, lovely, lovely woman. And she has a long connection with the Lumsden family. They were family friends. I could say a lot about Marilyn and her inspiration. As far as knowing her on a personal level, I don't. It's through my connection with the Lumsden family. We connect on email, that kind of thing. I think I mentioned to you I have a Marilyn Bell collection, which did not start off as a Marilyn Bell collection, but it just, it followed me. I'd go to an auction, I'd hear something about swimming and it would be Marilyn Bell. So I've acquired a lovely little collection of Marilyn Bell memorabilia.
Well, tell us how you kind of ended up as one of the leading historians of the swimming in this area. What inspired you? When did this start?
It's not definitive, and I don't consider myself a historian per se, more a keeper of history. I've been called a hoarder, but I think I have a wonderful collection. And it started out with my C&E memorabilia, which is my major passion. Just having, a huge collection of C&E memorabilia, picking up the pieces through the years, auctions, sales. There's a cross-referencing through, through the swimming world. C&E produced some wonderful aquatic shows through the years. And it was just coincidental that a number of the pieces that I started collecting, C&E wise, had a cross-referencing to swimming. So it wasn't sort of a specific time where I set out to collect memorabilia from the swimming world, but it was just an interest that I'd always had. So the things that I started purchasing at auctions were, 1930 woolen bathing suits and, that sort of thing. But most of the important pieces that I have now, as I've shared some of those with you, the ephemera from the C&E swim programs, I have quite a few. I haven't shared them all with you yet, and I certainly plan to do that. I'm working on Cliff Lumsden's history right now. So I have a number of newspapers and articles and that kind of thing related to Cliff and his swims, in particular the C&E.
So we've got C&E in general. We've got C&E with a special interest in swimming. We've got Marilyn Bell. We've got Cliff Lumsden. Old rodeo equipment, tractor tires. What else are you collecting up there, Lee?
I'm not going to admit to anything else. In the next room. I haven't cataloged all of my collections. So I think as I work through the whole COVID thing and I'm doing more cataloging, I'm realizing more so now than I knew in the past, the actual value of some of the pieces I have. And I'm not talking necessarily dollar value. Some of these things would not, sell for a great deal of money, but to certain individuals like ourselves, huge value. So I'm working through that right now to see what I actually have. And I won't mention the Christmas ornaments.
And if you had to grab three things and get out of the house quickly because there was a fire, what are the three favorite things? What would you grab?
Well, I'd probably perish. I don't know how I would do that, actually. I do presentations on C&E memorabilia, and inevitably somebody will say to me, do you realize that you've said like at least 6 times that's your favorite piece? It would probably be sentimental kid stuff that I would grab. But in terms of, pardon me, my favorite pieces of C&E, I have a Marilyn Bell doll. I would probably try and save her. She's precious. There are not that many around. She's adorable. One of my favorite pieces, I can say that honestly, is the commemorative coin that was issued by the CNE in 2004 for the 50th anniversary, because it's actually Marilyn Bell memorabilia and CNE. And it was given to me by Kim because it was given to Kim and she's like, oh, I don't collect this stuff here. So that's actually one of my favorite pieces.
You have to get us a three-dimensional picture of the Marilyn Bell doll, and then we can blackmail her. We look forward to that.
It's a lovely, lovely doll.
Do you have a plan for keeping this collection intact in 100 years' time?
I have a plan for preserving everything that I own in terms of having historical importance. I'm planning to speak with both Marilyn and her daughter Jody, and on advisement from them, make some decisions. The Cliff Lumsden materials that I have, which is quite extensive, I've received a number of newspapers locally from people. They have all been copied, our local counselors, so they're sort of intact. I'm not really sure. It's not something I want to divide. And, my kids are not that interested, maybe in a few little pieces sort of thing. So, the jury's out right at the moment, but it is something I'm working on. It will be preserved. I pretty much don't throw anything away if I can help it. So.
And just a preservation, are you in discussion with the local museum, the local council? Give us some hint of what your ideas are, because you're not the only person out there that's got some old scrapbooks or boxes of memorabilia, and like you, most of them are going, it's the first thing the kids are going to throw out when I die, and they clean out the house.
No, I've got quite a bit of labeling going on here, and I've talked to individuals. I had a rapport with the archivist at the CNE, Linda Coben, for several years. Unfortunately, historically, the CNE is not involved in the archives anymore, but they do have a manager through the exhibition place. So we are in touch. There may be some pieces that they would absolutely love to have from my CNE collection. So some may go that way. I do have a friend who collects as well, but she's my age. So our kids will both be arguing over, who's going to get them. And as I mentioned, Mark Grimes in our area, the counselor, he is working with the city of Toronto. They are in the process of creating a museum. Everything has been put on hold, obviously with COVID, but that's in the works for the next 3 years. So there's some plan to move at least some of the Cliff memorabilia there. And as far as the important earlier swim pieces, of course, we would ensure that the marathon swimming pieces go to, the most appropriate place at the time.
Tell us, just kind of the last question, tell us a little bit more on the Cliff project, and how do you go about assembling that stuff? Are you using Kim and getting a hold of every aunt and cousin and granny and grandnephew? Are you how do you get this stuff? Are you in the library all the time?
It's a curation. It's not going to be my book. It started off with, respectfully, Kim wanting to write a New York Times bestseller. And it's really not her forte, writing. So we started meeting for coffees, and she decided she wanted a book. And I said, well, I'm not really sure how much information we would have. At this age, you're still young, you still want to swim. She plans to swim the lake again. So, I got to about like 25, 30 pages of something that she could offer to her children. But in a very short period of time, we started looking, or I did, at the fact that there isn't a lot of documentation on Cliff. And he was a pretty amazing guy, 5-time world champion, the connection with the Marilyn Bell Glacio family. And it's growing. So I have talked to a number of people, crew member primarily. Kim does not have a lot of family. Sadly, both of her parents have passed. Joan was involved in the swimming world through the SSO. So there's a lot of information out there that's more current, but not a lot of historical information. I did speak to a friend of Cliff's just a few days ago, Louis Chasson, and he lives in the area. He's 90 plus, I believe. And he swam the 15 milers at the CNE. So we plan to do a COVID visit next week. So I'm trying to get little bits of information, through people other than, current or recent crew members. But people are very interested in, contributing. So I think we will probably do something in book form over the next year or so. It's hard to meet right now. Kim, pulls her car up on the street and we talk with our masks on, and, it's not the most conducive way of coming about information. But so that's basically the plan. I think it's really important to document, in particular, Cliff's history. He died fairly young, and he had a pretty rich history, which I haven't read a lot about, little snippets here and there. So I'd like to do that.
Just for yourself and anybody else who might be listening, we have a good number of honorees who've published books.
Yes.
Steve Munatonis, who's hosting with us today, has published several books.
Oh.
And recently, Dr. Chris Stockdale self-published an autobiography.
Oh.
Antonio, who does a number of these interviews, he has a book out now, and he's working on an English translation. And one of my sort of favorite stories is that there was one of our honorees, a great historian named Joe Grossman, who collected loads of early marathon records. When he got towards the end of his life, he passed on those records to Dale Petronich, who is also an honoree of the Hall of Fame. Dale spent probably 15 years one finger typing all these old handwritten notes into Microsoft Word. And as Dale, sorry folks, as Dale was getting to the end of his days, he, sorry, I'm just trying to get this machine to shut off here.
No, it's fine.
I don't know how to do it, but it stopped ringing. So as Dale got to the end of his days, he literally, he almost begged the executive committee. He said, please, he said, this thing has to get published. He said, I'm happy to pay for you to publish it, but I just can't seem to get it over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
And we somehow managed to reel in Steve Walker from San Francisco, who's an accomplished marathon swimmer, who had recently published a book. And Steve did an amazing job of somehow editing this monstrosity of a Word document. And that book was published about 2 years ago. It's a history of marathon swimming with a lot of Canadian history in it. So if anybody's looking to do books, we have a lot of people who have done them recently. There's a lot of different ways to do it. The one thing that generally doesn't happen, unless you're Lynn Cox, is you don't get a big advance from a publishing company, and you don't get on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yes,
There's some exceptions, but all the best for that. Lee, I want to thank you again for all of the material and all the help. Everything that you've sent to us has been examined and used, and three-dimensional Marilyn Bell doll. We just got to see that. That's just. And if you could have the doll travel around and pose in different places locally, that would be classic as well. Well, thank you very much, Lee.
You're welcome.